The morning air was crisp when Rebecca pushed through the glass doors of Titan Security Solutions. Her heart was beating a little faster than usual, but her face stayed calm. First days were always like this. New faces, new expectations, new chances to prove yourself. She'd been through worse. The office was exactly what she expected. Expensive furniture, dark wood panels, and walls covered with photos of important people shaking hands with the company's founders. Everything screamed success and confidence. The reception area smelled like expensive coffee and leather chairs. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled. "You must be Rebecca. First day, right? They're waiting for you in the conference room. Third door on the left." Rebecca nodded her thanks and walked down the hallway. Through the glass walls, she could see men in suits and tactical gear talking in groups. They looked comfortable here, like they owned the place. Most of them probably came from military or law enforcement backgrounds. This was their world. She found the conference room and stepped inside. 6 men sat around a large table and all eyes turned to her at once. The silence lasted just a second too long. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with graying hair and an expensive watch, stood up and extended his hand. "Rebecca, welcome. I'm Brad, your supervisor. Glad to have you on the team." His handshake was firm but quick, almost dismissive. "Take a seat. We were just going over the week's assignments." She sat down at the far end of the table. The other men gave her polite nods but didn't introduce themselves. Brad shuffled through some papers on the table and barely glanced at what must have been her resume. "So, Rebecca, I see you've got some background in security. That's good. We like to bring in fresh perspectives." He said it in a way that made fresh perspectives sound like code for something else. "We're going to ease you into things. No need to jump into the deep end right away." One of the younger guys across the table smirked. He had the kind of cocky energy that filled a room. "Yeah, we'll start you off slow. Get you familiar with how we do things around here." Rebecca just nodded. She'd learned a long time ago that sometimes it was better to stay quiet and observe. "People revealed more about themselves when you gave them space to talk," Brad continued. "Today I want you to shadow Kelly. She handles our client communications and scheduling. You'll learn the systems, get to know our protocols, that sort of thing. Client communications, scheduling." Rebecca kept her expression neutral, but inside, she felt that familiar tightness in her chest. She'd been hired as a security operator, not an assistant. But this was day one. Maybe they did this with everyone. "Sounds good," she said simply. The meeting wrapped up and the men filed out, already deep in conversation about an assignment that apparently didn't involve her. Brad stopped at the door and turned back. "Oh, and Rebecca, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. We know this world can be a bit intimidating for newcomers." There it was again. That tone, newcomers. As if she'd just walked off the street with no idea what she was doing. Kelly turned out to be pleasant enough. She was in her late 20s, energetic, and clearly good at her job. She showed Rebecca the computer systems, explained the client database, and walked her through the scheduling software. "It's a lot to take in at first," Kelly said cheerfully, "but you'll get the hang of it. Most of the guys started out doing some of this stuff too, so don't feel bad." Rebecca doubted that but didn't say anything. She spent the rest of the morning learning systems that felt far too simple for what she'd been hired to do. By lunch, she'd already memorized most of the protocols. The break room was buzzing when she walked in. Several of the men from the morning meeting were there, along with a few others she hadn't met yet. Conversation died down as she entered. She grabbed a coffee and stood near the window. "So, Rebecca, right?" The cocky one from earlier approached her. "What did you do before this? Security at a mall or something?" A few guys chuckled. Rebecca took a sip of her coffee. "Different things. I moved around a lot." "Different things," he repeated, grinning at his buddies. "Mysterious. I like it." Another man, older and quieter, glanced at her. "Brad says you're shadowing Kelly today." "That's good. Important to understand the admin side before you get into fieldwork." "If you get into fieldwork," that last part hung in the air. "If, not when." Rebecca just smiled slightly. "Makes sense to learn the whole operation." Brad walked in then, carrying a tablet. "All right, listen up. We've got a situation developing with the Cordova account. High-priority client. Possible threat assessment needed. I need Thompson, Rivera, and Chen ready to move within the hour." The room shifted into professional mode immediately. Men grabbed their phones, asked questions, started planning. Rebecca watched how they worked together. They were good, she could tell, experienced. They knew their roles. What about backup? Someone asked. Brad shook his head. 3 should be enough for assessment. If it escalates, we'll send more. Rebecca almost spoke up but caught herself. This wasn't her call to make, not yet. Not on day 1 when they still saw her as someone who needed to shadow the scheduler. The afternoon dragged. Kelly was kind and tried to make things interesting. But there were only so many ways to make database management exciting. Rebecca found herself watching the clock, something she rarely did. Around 4, she overheard 2 men talking near the printer. They didn't realize she was at the desk just around the corner. Can't believe they hired her, one said quietly. Diversity hire, probably.
You know how it is these days.
Companies need to check boxes. Yeah, but this isn't some regular corporate job. This is serious work. People's lives are on the line. Can't afford to babysit. Give her a few weeks. She'll probably realize this isn't for her and move on. Rebecca's hand tightened around her pen, but her face stayed completely calm. She'd heard versions of this conversation before. In different settings, different contexts, but always the same underlying message. You don't belong here. You're not good enough. You're only here because someone felt sorry for you. She took a slow breath and went back to her screen. Words didn't matter. Assumptions didn't matter. Only results mattered. She knew that better than anyone. When 5 o'clock came, Brad appeared at her desk. How was day 1? Not too overwhelming, I hope. It was fine. Kelly was very helpful. Good, good. Tomorrow we'll have you sit in on a client briefing, just to observe. You'll see how we present our security assessments. I look forward to it. Brad smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. We'll make an operator out of you yet. Just takes time. Rebecca packed her things and headed to the parking garage. As she sat in her car before starting the engine, she let herself feel the frustration for just a moment. Then she pushed it away. This job mattered. She needed it. Not just for herself, but for her sister's kids who were depending on her now. She'd been underestimated before. She'd been dismissed before. And every single time she'd proven them wrong. Not with words or complaints or demands. With competence. With skill. With the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly what she was capable of. They thought she was a rookie. A diversity hire. Someone who'd wash out in a few weeks. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. And for now, Rebecca thought as she started her car, that was just fine. Let them underestimate her. Let them think she was in over her head. She'd learned a long time ago that being underestimated was sometimes the biggest advantage you could have. The real question wasn't whether she could do this job. The real question was how long it would take them to figure that out. 3 weeks had passed, and Rebecca was still being treated like she might break if they gave her real work. She'd sat through briefings, organized files, and learned systems she could have mastered in 2 days. Every morning she walked into that office hoping today would be different. Every evening she left knowing it wasn't. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning during a training exercise. The company had a practice facility in the basement where they ran simulations and kept everyone sharp. Brad announced that everyone would rotate through partner drills. Standard defensive tactics, he called it. When it was Rebecca's turn, Brad paired her with Kyle, the cocky one who'd made the mall security comment on her first day. Kyle grinned as they stepped onto the mat. Several other guys stopped what they were doing to watch. This was entertainment for them. Take it easy on me, Kyle joked, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's her first time doing real training. Rebecca didn't respond. She took her position and waited. Kyle came at her with a basic attack, something between serious and playful. He clearly wasn't expecting much resistance. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Rebecca read his movement, shifted her weight, and used his momentum against him. Kyle found himself face down on the mat with his arm controlled before he even processed what had happened. She'd applied just enough pressure to make the point without hurting him. The room went quiet. Kyle got up, red-faced, trying to laugh it off. Got lucky there. Let's go again, Rebecca said calmly. This time Kyle came in serious, no more games. The result was the same. Then again. By the 4th round, Kyle was breathing hard and looking frustrated. Rebecca had barely broken a sweat. Brad stepped forward. All right, that's enough. Good work, both of you. But his tone was clipped, annoyed. He'd wanted to see her struggle, Rebecca realized. They all had. Where'd you learn to do that? One of the other operators asked. There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Maybe even a little respect. Previous training, Rebecca said simply. and walked away to get water. She overheard Brad talking to another supervisor by the equipment rack. "Decent moves," Brad was saying. "But mat work is different from real situations. She hasn't been tested when it actually matters." Rebecca took a long drink of water and said nothing. There was no point arguing. Words wouldn't change their minds. Only action would. The next day brought a bigger opportunity. The team was planning security for a corporate executive traveling to a conference in Chicago. Rebecca sat in on the briefing, taking notes like she'd done for weeks. They discussed the route from the airport to the hotel, potential vulnerabilities and backup plans. Rebecca noticed something immediately. The route they'd chosen had a bottleneck at the intersection of Michigan and Randolph, right during rush hour. If anything went wrong there, they'd be sitting ducks. There was a better alternative route that added only 3 minutes but avoided that choke point entirely. She waited for a pause in the conversation. "I have a thought about the route." Brad looked up from his notes. "Yes?" "The Michigan Avenue corridor gets congested between 4 and 6. If we take the alternate route through Lower Wacker Drive, we avoid that exposure and maintain more exit options." The room stayed quiet for a moment. Brad glanced at his planning sheet. "We've used this route dozens of times. It's proven and reliable." "I understand," Rebecca said. "I just think the alternative provides better tactical flexibility." One of the senior operators, a guy named Thompson, shook his head. "Lower Wacker is complicated. Multiple levels, lots of blind spots. You need to know what you're doing down there." The implication was clear. "You don't know what you're doing." Brad closed his folder. "We'll stick with the established route." "It's served us well." "Rebecca, I appreciate the input, but let's trust the experience in the room." She nodded and wrote nothing more in her notebook. Around her, the meeting continued as if she hadn't spoken. They finalized the plan with the route she knew was unnecessarily risky. Thompson and another operator would handle the Chicago job. Rebecca would stay in the office to monitor communications. That evening, as people were packing up, Rebecca went to the break room for coffee. Kyle and another operator were already there, talking quietly. They didn't notice her at first. "I'm telling you, man, she's just not cut out for this," Kyle was saying. "Yeah, she's got some moves. Maybe took some classes or whatever. But this work is different. It's not about knowing techniques. It's about being in the field making split-second calls when everything's going wrong." "Brad's being patient with her," the other guy said, "giving her time to find her place. But honestly, I think she'd be better in a different role, maybe training coordination or client relations." "Anything but field ops," Kyle agreed. "Last thing we need is to be babysitting when things get real." Rebecca poured her coffee slowly, letting them finish. Then she walked past them, made eye contact, and headed back to her desk. Kyle's face went pale. He'd just realized she'd heard everything. She didn't care about his embarrassment. What bothered her was the waste of it all. She had skills they needed, experience they could use, and insights that could make their operations better. But they couldn't see past their assumptions long enough to consider that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong about her. That night, Rebecca sat in her apartment looking at photos of her sister's kids. They were the reason she was doing this. After her sister died, someone had to step up. Someone had to provide stability and security. The kids needed her to succeed, not to give up because some men at work had fragile egos. She thought about quitting. It would be easier to find another job where she didn't have to prove herself every single day, but something in her refused to walk away. Not yet. She'd faced harder things than this. She'd survived situations these guys couldn't imagine. A little disrespect at work? That wasn't going to break her. The next few days were more of the same. Rebecca handled administrative tasks, sat in on meetings where her input was politely ignored, and watched as less experienced operators got the assignments she was more than qualified for. She started coming in early and staying late, making herself indispensable in small ways. If they wouldn't value her skills, she'd at least make sure they couldn't function without her organizational abilities. Friday brought a surprise. Brad called her into his office. She prepared herself for bad news, maybe a performance review telling her she wasn't meeting expectations. Instead, Brad leaned back in his chair and studied her. "Rebecca, I want to be straight with you. You've been here almost a month now. You're competent with the systems, you show up on time, you do what's asked. But I'm not seeing the kind of initiative I'd expect from someone who wants to move into operations." Rebecca kept her voice level. "I've offered suggestions in briefings. I've volunteered for field assignments. I'm not sure what else you're looking for. It's not about volunteering, Brad said. It's about proving you can handle the pressure. This job isn't for everyone. There's no shame in that. Maybe you'd be happier somewhere else, somewhere that plays more to your strengths. There it was, the gentle push toward the door. Not a firing, but an invitation to quit. I'm not looking to go anywhere else, Rebecca said. I can handle whatever pressure this job requires. Give me a chance to prove it. Brad sighed like he was doing her a favor. All right. Next week, I'll put you on a low-risk client escort. Local politician going to a fundraiser. Basic protection detail. You'll be back up to Thompson. Watch how he works, follow his lead, and don't improvise. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Because if this doesn't work out, we need to have a more serious conversation about your future here. Rebecca left his office knowing exactly what he expected. He expected her to mess up. He expected her to freeze or overreact or somehow confirm his belief that she didn't belong. They were setting her up to fail, giving her just enough rope to hang herself. She went back to her desk and pulled up everything she could find about the client, the venue, and the typical threats associated with that kind of event. If they were going to give her one chance, she'd make damn sure she was ready. Over the weekend, Rebecca ran through scenarios in her mind. She visualized the venue layout, planned her positioning, thought through contingencies. This was what she'd been trained to do. Not in some weekend certification course, but in the most demanding training program in the world. She'd operated in combat zones where the stakes were life and death. A fundraiser in downtown would be nothing compared to what she'd already survived. Monday morning, she walked into the office with quiet confidence. The other operators were buzzing about a developing situation with one of their high-value clients. Something about a threat assessment that had just been elevated. Rebecca listened while organizing files, picking up details. Brad was stressed, she could tell. He kept checking his phone and having quick, quiet conversations with senior staff. Something was happening, something that had them all on edge. Rebecca didn't ask questions. She just stayed ready. Because in her experience, situations like this had a way of changing fast. And when they did, being ready was the only thing that mattered. That afternoon, everything would change. But Rebecca didn't know that yet. She just knew that she was done being underestimated, done being treated like someone who didn't belong. She belonged. She'd always belonged. And Sue? It was 2:30 on a Monday afternoon when everything went sideways. Rebecca was at her desk reviewing client protocols when the operations floor suddenly erupted in controlled chaos. Phones started ringing. People rushed between offices, and the energy in the room shifted from routine to urgent in seconds. Linda, the operations manager and one of the few people who'd treated Rebecca with basic respect, came striding through the office. We've got a situation. Patterson Tech CEO just received a credible threat. FBI confirmed it an hour ago. He's testifying in federal court next week, and someone doesn't want that to happen. Brad was already pulling together his response team. Where's the client now? Downtown Meridian Hotel, presidential suite, top floor. He's got one personal protection agent with him, but we need a full detail there now. This threat is active, not theoretical. Rebecca watched as Brad grabbed his tactical bag and started making calls. Thompson and Rivera appeared from the training room, already gearing up. Chen was pulling surveillance equipment from the tech closet. This was the A-team, the operators Brad trusted with the highest stakes assignments. We're 30 minutes out, Brad said, checking traffic on his phone. Maybe 40 with this construction on the interstate. Linda's face tightened. The threat intelligence suggests they might move today. Within hours, possibly minutes. We can't wait 40 minutes. Brad looked around the room, calculating. His best people were either with him or out on other assignments. Then his eyes landed on Rebecca still at her desk. She saw him considering it, saw the doubt flash across his face. Mitchell's 5 minutes from that hotel, Linda said quietly. She's our only option. The room went silent. Every operator within earshot turned to look. Kyle actually started to speak up, probably to protest, but Linda cut him off with a sharp glance. Brad's jaw worked like he was chewing on glass. She hasn't run a protection detail before. She's run plenty, Linda said, and there was something in her tone that made Brad pause. Trust me on this. Rebecca was already standing, her mind shifting into a mode she hadn't accessed in weeks. All the frustration and anger from being sidelined evaporated. There was only the mission now, the objective, the clear focus that came from training and experience. "I can be there in 6 minutes," Rebecca said. Her voice was different now, stripped of the polite patience she'd been using. This was the voice of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Brad studied her for another second, then made his decision. "Go, keep the client secure until we arrive. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Your job is to protect and hold position. Understood?" "Understood." Rebecca grabbed her go-bag from her locker and was out the door before anyone else could react. Her car was in the underground garage. She had it started and moving within 30 seconds. As she pulled into traffic, her training took over completely. Her breathing slowed. Her mind cleared. The world narrowed to nothing but the task ahead. She'd memorized the downtown layout weeks ago, a habit from her old life. She knew which streets would be clogged at this time of day, which shortcuts to take where the cameras were. 6 minutes was optimistic, but she could make it in 7. Her phone rang through the car speakers. Linda's voice came through. "Rebecca, I'm sending you the client's exact location and the threat profile. The FBI intercepted communications suggesting a 2-person team. Professional, well-funded. They're looking at today because courthouse security increases tomorrow. What do we know about the personal protection agent with him? Former Secret Service. Good reputation. Name's Vincent Hayes. I'm calling him now to let him know you're coming." Rebecca processed the information as she drove. 2 professionals meant this wasn't amateur hour. They'd have planned for multiple contingencies, would have surveillance, would know the building layout as well as she did. Her advantage was that they weren't expecting additional security to arrive this quickly. She pulled into the Meridian Hotel's parking garage and grabbed her bag. No time for the elevators in the main lobby. She headed for the service entrance, the route she'd scouted mentally a dozen times when reviewing the building's security profile. Her credentials got her past the first checkpoint. A quick conversation with the head of hotel security got her access to the service elevator. "Presidential suite," she told him. "There's an active threat against the guest. Lock down this entrance. Nobody comes through without calling it up to me first." The security manager, a retired cop who knew real urgency when he heard it, didn't argue. He got on his radio immediately. Rebecca took the service elevator to the top floor. Her heart rate was elevated but controlled. 70 beats per minute, perfect. Her hands were steady. Her vision was sharp. This was what she'd been trained for, what hundreds of hours of brutal preparation had built her for. Not the office politics and the condescending comments, but this. The moment when everything mattered. She emerged on the presidential floor and found Vincent Hayes in the hallway. He was in his 50s, fit and alert, positioned outside the suite door. He turned as she approached, hand moving toward his weapon until he saw her credentials. "You're from Titan?" "Rebecca Mitchell. Operations manager sent me ahead of the main team." "What's the situation?" Vincent relaxed slightly but stayed vigilant. "Client's secure inside. I've got eyes on all entrances to this floor. Hotel security is solid, but this building has too many access points. If someone's determined and skilled, they can get up here." Rebecca nodded. "Show me your defensive setup." They spent 2 minutes reviewing the layout. Vincent had done good work positioning himself and securing the immediate area, but Rebecca's trained eye caught what he'd missed. The maintenance access corridor had a door that led to an adjoining suite. That suite was supposedly empty, but it was an obvious vulnerability. "When was that room last checked?" "I verified it was unoccupied an hour ago." "I need to check it again." "They could have moved in after your sweep." Vincent hesitated. "Client's alone if I leave this position. I'll be 30 seconds. If anything happens, I'm through that wall faster than anyone coming from a different direction." She moved to the adjoining suite's door and used her lockpick set. Another skill the office guys had no idea she possessed. The door opened silently. The room was dark. She entered low, weapon drawn, clearing corners with practiced efficiency. Empty, but the window had been opened recently. She could feel the air current. Rebecca moved to the window and looked down. Fire escape access recently used. Fresh scuff marks on the sill. Her pulse quickened. Someone had been here checking approaches, planning, maybe even watching right now from a different vantage point. She was back in the hallway in 20 seconds. That room's been compromised. Someone scouted it within the last few hours. Vincent's expression hardened. "We need to move him." "Not yet. Moving makes him vulnerable. We lock down and wait for backup." "They're en route. That's when Rebecca heard it. A sound that didn't belong. The service elevator, the one she'd used, was moving. Someone was coming up. She checked her phone. No message from the security manager she'd told to lock it down. Vincent, get inside with the client. Lock the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice followed by the code word. She thought fast. Lighthouse. If anyone tries to come in without that word, assume hostile. Vincent didn't question her. He disappeared into the suite. Rebecca heard the deadbolt click. She moved to a position that gave her cover and a clear line of sight to the elevator. Her training screamed through her mind. Identify the threat. Control the space. Protect the principal. Minimize civilian exposure. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. A man in a hotel maintenance uniform stepped out, carrying a toolbox. He looked ordinary, forgettable, but Rebecca's instincts, honed by years of survival in environments where mistakes meant death, screamed that something was wrong. His uniform was clean. Too clean. Maintenance workers who'd been working all day didn't look that fresh. His boots were wrong too. Tactical boots painted to look worn, but the tread was too new, and the way he carried the toolbox, the weight distribution was off. That box was heavier than tools would make it. The man's eyes swept the hallway and locked on her. For a fraction of a second, his expression changed. He'd been expecting one guard, not two. His hand started moving toward the toolbox, and Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that what came next would determine whether people lived or died. Stop right there, she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd given orders in combat zones. Hands where I can see them. The man froze, calculating. Rebecca could see him weighing options. He was a professional. This wasn't going to end with him just walking away. I'm hotel maintenance, he said, his accent slightly off. Got a call about a problem with the HVAC on this floor. There's no HVAC problem. Put the toolbox down slowly and step back. His eyes flickered to the suite door, then back to her. He was measuring distances, assessing her capability. Rebecca let him see her stance, her readiness. She wanted him to understand that whatever he was thinking about doing, she was 3 steps ahead. The moment stretched. In the distance, she could hear sirens. Brad and the team must have called in police support. Help was coming, but not fast enough if this went wrong right now. The man in the maintenance uniform made his decision. His hand moved fast, going for something in tea. Brad stood in the hallway of the Meridian Hotel looking like someone had just told him the sky was actually green. Around him, his team was processing what they'd walked into. Police were securing the suspect Rebecca had subdued. Hotel security was giving statements, and Vincent Hayes, the client's personal protection agent, was talking to his boss on the phone, repeatedly using words like professional, exceptional, and saved his life. Brad approached Rebecca, who was finishing her statement with the detective. His face was doing something complicated, cycling between confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been respect. Mitchell, I need to know. He paused, struggling with how to ask. Where exactly did you learn to do that? Rebecca looked at him steadily. She'd been waiting for this moment, dreading it in some ways, ready for it in others. There was no more hiding now, no more staying in the background. The situation had forced her hand. Previous experience, she said simply. That's what you said before. But that wasn't security guard training. That was military-level response. So I'm asking you directly. What's your background? The client, Richard Patterson, emerged from his suite with Vincent beside him. Patterson was a tech billionaire who'd built his company from nothing and had the sharp eyes of someone who didn't miss details. He'd been watching everything through the security camera feed Vincent had set up. I'd like to know that too, Patterson said, because what I just watched on that camera was the most professional tactical response I've ever seen, outside of government protection details. And I've had Secret Service protection before. Rebecca felt the weight of everyone's attention. Kyle and Thompson had gone quiet. Rivera was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. Even Linda, who'd sent her here, was watching with interest. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no talking her way around it. She took a breath. I served in the Navy for 12 years. Special operations. I was part of the second group of women to complete the basic underwater demolition SEAL training. I did 3 combat deployments, ran reconnaissance operations, and led a tactical team during my last deployment. The silence that followed was absolute. Kyle's mouth literally fell open. Thompson blinked like he was trying to process a foreign language. Brad's face went from red to pale to red again. You're a... Brad couldn't even finish the sentence. Former Navy SEAL, yes. Vincent's eyes widened with recognition. Wait, Mitchell, Rebecca Mitchell. You were involved in that operation in Kandahar, weren't you? The one in 2019? Rebecca nodded slowly. She didn't like talking about that night, but Vincent clearly knew enough that denying it would be pointless. What operation? Brad asked. Vincent turned to him. It was classified at the time, but some details came out later. A SEAL reconnaissance team was compromised during an operation in Afghanistan. They got pinned down by a much larger force. Should have been a complete loss, but their team leader kept them alive for 6 hours until extraction arrived. Took down multiple hostiles, coordinated air support, administered medical aid to 2 wounded teammates, and got every single person out alive. That team leader was a woman, which made news in certain circles because it was one of the first major combat successes after women were allowed into SEAL teams. He looked back at Rebecca. That was you. It was a team effort, Rebecca said quietly. Everyone did their part. The guys I know who know guys who were there tell a different story, Vincent said. They say you're the reason those men are still alive. Patterson stepped forward, extending his hand. I think you just saved my life, Ms. Mitchell, and I'm someone who doesn't say that lightly. Thank you, Rebecca shook his hand. Just doing my job, sir. That was a lot more than just doing a job. Patterson turned to Brad. Is she on my protection detail going forward? Because if not, she needs to be. I trust her judgment completely. Brad looked like he was trying to swallow a tennis ball. We'll make the necessary arrangements. The police needed more statements and the scene had to be processed, so the next hour was a blur of official questions and coordination. The second suspect, the one who'd been working with the man Rebecca caught, was apprehended trying to flee the building. Police found detailed surveillance notes, photos of Patterson, and enough evidence to confirm this had been a serious, well-planned attempt. When the immediate crisis was over, Brad pulled Rebecca aside. They stood in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby while his team loaded equipment back into their vehicles. Why didn't you tell us? His voice was strained. Why didn't you put that on your resume? Mention it in your interview? Rebecca met his eyes. I did put it on my resume. Military service, special operations, combat experience. It was all there. You barely looked at it during our first meeting. Brad flinched. She was right, and they both knew it. I didn't advertise the SEAL part because I wanted to be judged on my current abilities, not on my past credentials, Rebecca continued. I thought if I proved myself here, showed what I could do, it would speak for itself. I didn't expect to spend weeks filing paperwork and being treated like I'd never seen real action before. That's not... Brad started, then stopped. Okay, that's fair. I made assumptions. I was wrong. You weren't just wrong, Rebecca said, and there was steel in her voice now. You were dismissive. You assumed because I was a woman walking into a male-dominated field that I must be inexperienced or incompetent, or only there to check a diversity box. You heard Kyle say that and you did nothing to shut it down. You put me on administrative duty and acted like you were doing me a favor by letting me observe the real operators. Brad's face reddened again, but this time it was shame, not anger. You're right. I owe you an apology. A real one. I don't need an apology, Rebecca said. I need to do the job I was hired for. I need to be trusted to use my skills. And I need the men on your team to respect me as an operator, not resent me as an obligation. Thompson approached then, overhearing the last part. For what it's worth, Mitchell, you have my respect. I've never seen anyone handle a situation that smoothly, and I'm sorry for doubting you. Others came over too, one by one. Rivera admitted he'd been wrong to question her abilities. Even Kyle, who looked like this whole experience had shaken his worldview, managed an awkward apology. I feel like an idiot, Kyle said. All those comments I made. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask, Rebecca said. You assumed. There's a difference. Vincent joined them, having finished securing his client. I worked with SEALs during my Secret Service days. I know what the training involves, what it takes to make it through. The washout rate is over 75%. The fact that you not only completed it, but excelled enough to lead teams in combat tells me everything I need to know about your capabilities. He paused. I'm recommending to Patterson that you be his primary protection lead for the duration of this threat. Brad nodded slowly. Agreed, Mitchell, if you're willing. I want you heading up this detail. You've earned it. Rebecca considered this. Part of her wanted to tell them all where they could put their sudden respect, their convenient change of attitude now that they knew her credentials. But she thought about why she was here. Her sister's kids. The stability they needed. The job she'd come here to do. I'll take the assignment, she said. But going forward, things need to change. Not just for me, but for anyone else you hire. Judge people on their abilities, not your assumptions. Give everyone a fair chance to prove what they can do. You're right, Brad said, and I'll make sure that happens. The sun was setting as they finally left the hotel. Rebecca rode back to the office with Linda, who'd stayed to coordinate with law enforcement. You knew, didn't you? Rebecca asked. About my background, Linda smiled slightly. I actually read your resume, all of it. I also made some calls to people I know who might know people you served with. I had a pretty good idea of who we were hiring. Then why didn't you say something when they were sidelining me? Because you needed to show them yourself. If I'd walked in on day one and announced you were a decorated Navy SEAL, they would have either felt intimidated or assumed I was exaggerating. You proving it through action means they can't deny it, can't minimize it. They have to respect it because they saw it with their own eyes. Rebecca thought about that. That's pretty calculated. I've been working in this field for 20 years, Linda said. I've seen a lot of talented women passed over or pushed out because men couldn't handle their competence. I've learned that sometimes you have to let them trip over their own assumptions before they're ready to see the truth. Back at the office, word had spread. The night shift staff who'd heard about the incident looked at Rebecca differently. The whispered conversation stopped when she walked by, replaced by nods of acknowledgement. Patterson's executive assistant called an hour later. The CEO wanted Rebecca's team to handle all his security until the trial concluded. He was also asking the company for a comprehensive review of their security protocols, with Rebecca leading the assessment. Brad agreed immediately. That evening, as Rebecca packed up to leave, Brad stopped by her desk one more time. Mitchell. Rebecca. I know I said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry. I made assumptions based on nothing but bias, and it almost cost us a client. It could have cost lives. The next morning felt different. Rebecca walked into the office at 7:30, same as always, but the atmosphere had completely changed. People who'd barely acknowledged her for weeks now nodded as she passed. Some even smiled. A few of the operators who'd been most dismissive couldn't quite meet her eyes yet. Brad was already at his desk, which was unusual. He waved her over. Mitchell, I spent last night rethinking our entire training and assignment structure. I want you to look at this and tell me what you think. He slid a document across the desk. It was a proposal for blind evaluation of new hires, skill-based assignment protocols, and mandatory bias training for all senior staff. Rebecca scanned it. This is good, but it needs teeth. Make the bias training part of annual reviews. Tie promotion eligibility to completion. Brad nodded, making notes. Done. Also, Patterson wants you personally heading his security through the trial. That's 3 weeks of high-visibility work. You okay with that? Absolutely. Good. And I'm putting you in charge of reviewing our threat assessment protocols. If you caught that vulnerability yesterday, I want to know what else we're missing. It was a complete reversal from the person who'd suggested she might be happier somewhere else just days ago. Rebecca accepted it without gloating. There was too much real work to do. Over the next few days, the dynamic in the office settled into something new. Kyle actually came to her with questions about hand-to-hand combat techniques, genuinely wanting to learn. Thompson asked her to review his protection detail plans before submitting them. Rivera invited her to lead the next training session, but the real change came 2 weeks later when the company hired 3 new operators. One was a woman named Jennifer, who'd served in military intelligence. During her first day orientation, Rebecca watched how Brad handled it. Welcome to the team, Jennifer, Brad said, actually reading her full resume this time. I see you've got extensive experience in threat analysis and field operations. We're going to get you into active assignments immediately. Mitchell here will be your training officer for the first week. Jennifer looked relieved, like she'd been bracing for something different. Rebecca understood that feeling completely. During their first one-on-one, Jennifer asked the question directly. Is it going to be difficult here? Being a woman in this environment? Rebecca considered her answer carefully. I'm not going to lie to you. Some guys will underestimate you. Some will test you. Some will assume you don't belong. But here's what I learned. Your skills speak louder than their assumptions, but only if you make them listen. Don't wait for permission to be excellent. Show them what you can do and don't apologize for being good at your job. That's what you did? Eventually. I spent too long trying to prove myself quietly, hoping they'd notice. What finally changed things was a situation where my abilities couldn't be ignored. You might face the same thing. Just be ready when that moment comes. Jennifer nodded slowly. I heard about what happened at the Meridian. They said you took down a professional operative single-handedly. I did my job, Rebecca said. Same as you'll do yours. Don't let anyone make you feel like competence is something you need to justify. Over the following weeks, Rebecca found herself becoming a mentor to not just Jennifer, but to others in the company who'd felt overlooked or underestimated. A young analyst who had brilliant ideas but was too intimidated to share them in meetings. A former military translator who was being pigeonholed into communications roles when he had tactical skills they weren't using. She started running weekly sessions on tactical thinking and threat assessment. These weren't mandatory, but they quickly became the most attended training in the company. People wanted to learn from her, and not just because of her credentials. They respected how she approached problems, how she explained complex concepts clearly, how she made everyone feel like they had something valuable to contribute. The Patterson detail went flawlessly. His testimony helped secure convictions in a major corporate fraud case, and he walked away without a single incident. On the last day of the assignment, he pulled Rebecca aside. I'm going to be writing a letter to your company's ownership, he said, recommending you for promotion to senior operations director. You've got the skills, the judgment, and the leadership ability. They'd be foolish not to move you up. I appreciate that, Mr. Patterson. I also want to tell you something else. He paused, choosing his words. I almost didn't hire Titan for this job. Another firm had better marketing, more impressive client lists. But Linda convinced me to give them a chance. Now I know why she fought for it. She knew you were here. Rebecca smiled. Linda's got good instincts. She does. But so do you. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. A month after the Meridian incident, Rebecca was sitting in a meeting with the company's senior leadership. They were discussing a major contract bid for a Fortune 500 company's global security operations. Brad was presenting their capabilities when the potential client, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane who ran corporate security for the firm, interrupted. I'm impressed with your team's credentials, Diane said, but I have a question. How do you handle unconscious bias in your hiring and assignment practices? My company takes this seriously, and we need partners who do the same. There was a brief, uncomfortable silence. Then Brad gestured to Rebecca. Mitchell, why don't you address that? Rebecca stood, comfortable in front of the room in a way she hadn't been weeks ago. 2 months ago, I couldn't have answered that question positively. This company was struggling with exactly the bias issues you're concerned about, but they recognized the problem and took real action to fix it. We now have blind resume reviews, skill-based assignment protocols, and mandatory training for all staff. More importantly, we've changed our culture. We evaluate people on their abilities, not our assumptions about them. That's good to hear, Diane said, but culture change is easy to claim and hard to prove. How do I know this is real? Rebecca smiled slightly. Because I'm the person they underestimated, dismissed, and nearly pushed out. And now I'm standing here as senior operations lead, telling you that this company had the courage to face their mistakes and actually change. That's harder than just talking about diversity. It requires admitting you were wrong. Brad shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't interrupt. Diane studied Rebecca for a long moment. What's your background, if you don't mind me asking? 12 years Navy Special Operations, 3 combat deployments, team leader experience. I came here with extensive qualifications, and it took a crisis for this company to see what was right in front of them. But when they finally saw it, they didn't just acknowledge it. They changed their entire system. That's the kind of partner you want, one that learns and adapts. They won the contract. Diane specifically requested Rebecca as the primary liaison for her company's security needs. 3 months after her first day at Titan Security, Rebecca was promoted to Director of Operations. It came with a significant raise, her own team, and real authority to shape how the company functioned. She used that authority to continue pushing for fair evaluation and opportunity for everyone. But the moment that meant the most came on a random Tuesday afternoon. She was walking past the training room when she saw Jennifer working with two newer employees, teaching them tactical positioning. One of the new employees was a young guy who'd been questioning whether he was ready for fieldwork. "You've got the skills," Jennifer was saying. "Don't let doubt or anyone else's assumptions hold you back." "Someone taught me that, and now I'm teaching you." Rebecca smiled and kept walking. That was the real change, she realized. Not her promotion or the company's new policies, but the culture that was building. A place where people were judged on their abilities, where competence was recognized regardless of who demonstrated it, where experience and skill mattered more than assumptions. Her phone buzzed. A text from her nephew asking if she'd make it to his soccer game that evening. She replied that she'd be there. The job was good now, important even, but it wasn't everything. It was a way to provide stability for her family, to use her skills for something meaningful, to prove that her years of service and sacrifice had value in civilian life. That evening, standing on the sidelines of a middle school soccer field, watching her nephew play while her niece did homework in the car, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The angry chip on her shoulder from those first weeks at Titan had faded. She'd proven what she needed to prove, not just to them but to herself. She could do this civilian life thing. She could be the guardian her sister's kids needed. She could excel in a career that challenged her without asking her to deploy to war zones. She could be excellent without having to fight for every inch of recognition. The next morning, she was back at the office early, reviewing security protocols for a new client. Brad stopped by with coffee, something that had become his peace-offering ritual. "Big day," he said. "The new training facility opens this afternoon. Your design, your protocols, your show." Rebecca had spent weeks planning the new facility. It included scenarios specifically designed to challenge assumptions and biases. Situations where success required listening to every team member regardless of rank or seniority. "I'm looking forward to it," she said. "You know," Brad said,